Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome. It is 6:32. This is the November 11th Select Board meeting. I'm Roger Arnold. Claudette Brochu, chair, is just running a few minutes late. She'll join us, but in the meantime, we have Mary Layton, John Langus, Rob Gear here with us. So we have a quorum, and then Herb Durfee, our town manager, and Miranda Bergmeyer, his assistant, is also with us. I'm going to see if I can pull up the Act 92 statement for Vermont, but basically that tells you that we are conducting this meeting on Zoom because of the coronavirus. I can confirm that the public has access to this meeting and the ability to participate in this meeting, and votes will be by roll call. And anything else that I forgot? Yes, so if you would like to participate as a member of the public, please, and you're on Zoom, please go to participants and then push raise hand. That will signal to me that you would like to speak, and I'll alert Claudette. And if you're on the phone, *9 is to raise your hand. And if for some reason I can't unmute you, once recognized, press *6. Okay, so I did not read the statement, but I think that will do. So the first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion? Or would anyone like to make any changes rather?
No changes.
No changes. Herb, do you have your hand up?
Do you, just with regard to that Woody Adams parcel, if you wanted to take that up tonight as a technical change, I mean, you can't, by statute, you can change the amendment, but you can change the agenda, but you'd have to make an amendment to do so. So I did, from my standpoint, either way, and I haven't heard from Craig yet to say whether it could delay until next week or not. It's just the last link in the chain. That's all.
Yes. Okay.
I'll make that motion, and then we can discuss if people are opposed to it. But I move to amend the agenda to include reconsideration of the Woody Adams parcel language that, for technical reasons, has to be amended and revoted.
I'll second that.
Okay. So a discussion on this request for an agenda change.
You know, I looked at the minutes. It's helpful to look back at those, and I mean, we gave a pretty unequivocal support to this grant application. So I don't think it's a surprise thing really to anyone by adding it here. And so if it's helpful to keep things moving on, I'm supportive of having this on the agenda tonight.
Was two questions I just have for people's thoughts on that. Do we feel like there was a substantial enough discussion on that particular modification of which the name would be attached to this project in perpetuity? That is the clarification that is being sought in the language. And so if we feel like that was always understood or made clear in all of our discussions, is there a yes on that or a no?
I mean, I think that would be the discussion of the actual agenda item as opposed to whether to add it to the agenda.
Okay. And so the only other question that I have that's actually more administrative for agenda setting is, do we feel like the public would need more notice, or do we feel like that is not needed?
I think it's enough notice.
Great. So can I get a vote on that?
You doing roll call?
A roll call vote. Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
John?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And I vote yes. And so Claudette just joined us. So I don't know if we could mark that she arrived right after we voted to add this item onto the agenda. And that being said, Claudette, welcome. I'm now turning the meeting over to you. We just voted to add the clarification language to the parcel, Woody Adams parcel, to the agenda for discussion. Yeah, that is it. I'm moving. We're still on the approval of the agenda. We haven't, we just made that addition. We just amended it. So yeah, there you go.
Any other changes, shifting around, anything, deletions to the agenda?
I actually, if it would be okay, I just would wonder if it would do any good at the top of the meeting to discuss process a little bit on the last agenda item on the budget, or is it more appropriate to discuss process for that agenda item when the agenda item comes up?
I would prefer the latter.
Okay. That's fine.
If nobody has
I
any,
agree. So sir, where are we going to stick the Woody Adams discussion? Are we going to put that? I would
Yeah.
suggest that be earlier in the meeting in case anyone's on to track that.
Yeah, that was my question as well.
Maybe put
Where-
it around,
where to put it.
5 after 5 before 6. 6, I think, is when we start doing the inside baseball.
works for me.
Okay, so like a 5A or something.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's
Thank
good.
you.
Mhm.
Okay, so if there are, that's clear, we'll discuss the Woody Adams language after the Mount Scottney presentation, Mount Scottney grant presentation. And if there's nothing else, then we'll move on with the agenda to public and/or select board comments. Any member of the public or select board wish to comment on anything that's not on the agenda?
I do.
I saw a hand from John and a voice from Linda. We'll go to John first.
I just wanted to offer a hearty congratulations to our colleague Roger, to he and Kristen's successful baby boy delivery. Glad everyone's healthy and happy, and congratulations to everyone.
Thank you.
You're here.
Been great.
And actually, I also wanted to add a very hearty thanks to Bonnie and Judy and all of the volunteers that worked on making the election day work smoothly this year. That was a terrific effort, and I know that lots of people have offered their gratitude for that. So I wanted to add my voice to that.
I agree on both of those. Congratulations, Roger
Thank you.
and Kristen and Booker.
Yes.
And thank you, Bonnie and Judy and BCA and select board members who helped out and other members of the public. So, and now go ahead, Linda, name and locatable address.
Linda Cook, 147 River Road. I have several questions. I'm going to pop out there and let you answer them as we go. Some of them are under the consent agenda and not knowing whether or not you'll discuss them. First, I'd like to, looking at the webpage, not seeing an update on the culvert 19 on the website. The last time I think it was done was several months ago. Is that something that's going to be kept updated or not anymore? Number two, does the select board support the Vermont Elder Justice Project, where they will be putting posters and notifying the public of this program and the telephone numbers and assistance that is out there? Also, is Tracy Hall being opened up again for programs? Just noticing fans were being bought for Tracy Hall, so wondering if that's happening. And the last question is, it's a two-parter. Has the union signed the contract? If so, what is the total legal fees for the 2.5-year process to be able to get this signed?
So I'm going to defer to Herb on the COVID update, the webpage about COVID update and Tracy Hall.
Thank you.
And actually I doubt that there can be an answer about the total legal cost for the union tonight, because that's probably not, that's going to need to get worked on. But yes, the union has ratified the contract. So now to you, Herb, on the other two.
So I do, especially in light, I do need to do an updated COVID-19 overall that I usually do. I just, most especially because the governor has because of the surge is starting up again, and the governor has done kind of the travel restrictions. So I'll be doing an updated one relatively shortly. I can't answer the question on the Vermont Elder Justice Project. I did not have the information in the last meeting's packet. So as a result, when it was mentioned, it's included in the correspondence for this meeting. So that's why at least it's in the packet, but I can't answer the question with regard to the board's support there. The opening of Tracy Hall, that Tracy Hall is not opening anytime soon. In fact, if anything, I'm going to further limit folks from coming in here and going back to a tight lockdown. I still am allowing Bonnie to schedule appointments as need be, but that's up to her. And then the union contract indeed has been signed by all parties, meaning it was effective on October 28th. And the legal fees I'd have to add those up. And there's probably a bill that we don't have yet since it was just finished up on October 28th. But would be happy to do that.
May I do one follow-up question?
Sure.
It's in reference to the Vermont Elder Justice Project. Is this waiting for the next meeting for the board to have a discussion and make a decision whether they'll carry forward with it?
At our last meeting, we had a presentation by the, I can't remember his name, Arthur. And I'm not sure there was a formal ask out of any of that. We did not have it as a motion. I don't know if board members would like to see us formally make a motion or have it on our next agenda to discuss about whether or not we formally state that we support or don't support the grant program. Any thoughts on it by anybody?
I
Board
mean,
member?
I think, what are we being asked to provide funding, provide resources? I mean, I think certainly appreciated the presentation and you know, it seems like a great initiative. I'm not sure what we're being asked for.
I think all we would, I'd have to go back and look at the tape, but I'm not, I believe the work that they're already doing with Chief Frank. I wasn't sure that there was a specific ask of us either. I didn't feel there was. Roger?
I think,
There was a request, if I may. It was subtle because it was in a wider presentation. And I think if we want to discuss it, we should probably have an agenda item or talk about it in, you know, our budgeting process. But there was a subtle hint for more funding, as one would expect from a social service agency, and particularly in for training with some of the partners that they have already collaborated with currently.
I mean, this is obviously one that, right, you would expect to get a ton of support as a special budget item in our town. And so, you know, maybe just anyone, Herb, and in your office that could just help them to understand how they go about getting a petition to get a special, you know, budget line on the town ballot. Like that would seem to me to be something that would be an easy way to see if folks in town would be able to support them with some funding.
Did you have a follow-up, Linda?
excuse me. I think part of the reason I was asking is they've got a roadmap to a coordinated community response, which gives a lot of agencies that are out there available for assistance and telephone numbers. So I was more looking to getting their flyer put out so that people are aware of WISE and Women's Freedom Center, Pride Center, Police Emergency Services. All these agencies that are on the flyer, I think would be good to have that information out there.
I don't disagree. I would, like I mentioned, I'm going to have to go back and look at the tape to see. I did not hear a specific ask. I know there's been work being done with Chief Frank, and That's the one thing I can recall, but yeah, so.
Yeah, I mean, the trick is that, right, there's so few places where people are coming in now. We could easily ask Herb to put it up on the bulletin board, but no one comes in Tracy Hall. We could ask Chief Frank to post it inside the police department for anyone comes in there. We can make sure that there's some flyers that are over in the senior housing over by the library. Maybe post it at the library, but I think yeah, as far as getting the word out, there's less we can do since there's people out to get the word to.
Roger, were you going to make one more point?
No, I'm happy to move on.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other public comments?
Chief Frank has her hand up, and then I had one thought comment as well, so you know.
Go ahead, Chief.
Chief Jennifer Frank from the Norwich Police Department. I just wanted to do a brief comment reference. I'm not an agenda item, but just there seems to be some misinformation. Recently, we interacted with an individual on Turnpike Main Street and Dorrance Drive, who is an unhomed individual who is suffering from a series of different incidents in his life. There was a recent posting that was referenced the select board packet that indicated that the police department provided no health evaluation and provided no services to this individual because they were not committing criminal activity. I just want to clear that up a little bit. We responded initially down to Main Street when somebody reported he was unhomed and provided both clothing and conducted a 4th Street locatable for him and down to the Foley Park. In addition, we were called up to Dorrance Drive because he was utilizing the clothing line, which was restricted to residents only. At that time, we offered him food, provided him with a toiletry services bag, offered him transportation, informed him about the Haven, offered to transport him to the Haven, but he said he didn't want to live in congregate housing. We further advised that we would be willing to provide him, he asked for a cheeseburger, so we said we would take him to Dan and Witt's. He stated that he only wanted money, at which point I offered to get the cheeseburger and give it to him. He said he didn't want to be seen with the police, so I offered to actually get the cheeseburger, meet him around the back side of the building and provide it to him. After that point, he was further down on Turnpike Road when an individual approached him in a vehicle. When they approached him in the vehicle, he asked the person for money. The person said that they wouldn't give him money, but would be happy to give him food. At that time, he swore at the individual. The individual called us and said, this person, he needs services. So the police department went out again, offered a variety of services, some of which this individual chose and they did not take. The police department received 3 further phone calls about this person. One because they'd knocked on a door and asked for food, at which they were given a box of Cheez-Its. Another one because they were sitting on a front porch steps, but then left after asking. I want to point out that in the last 3 times of report, the police department did not respond to that individual because we did not want to create a situation of police harassment. In none of those activities was he committing criminal activity. And as such, we had 3 prior interactions, all of which we had provided resources, some of which he chose to take and some of which he didn't. Unfortunately, people don't always get to know that because of the privacy of individuals. We try not to share that information publicly. But there was recently a note in the select board packet that said that we said that there was nothing we could do unless the individual was trespassed or engaging in some similar behavior, and a remark that this person would have undergone an evaluation, but because it was a psychiatric or behavioral, that no health evaluation was offered. Again, I can specifically speak that there were 3 officers who interacted with this individual: transportation, food, toiletries, clothing, a calling card, the ability to actually put food but no alcohol onto a Dan and Witt's charge card were all offered and available to this person. But by the time we had reached our 4th, 5th, and 6th interaction, because the person hadn't done anything criminal and they had denied any further services from the police department, we didn't interact with them. And we want people to take resources, but we also respect that people have the right to choose not to accept our services. So I just wanted that for clarification, and I'd be happy to speak with anybody, or if anybody has any questions, we have all the police reports as well. People are welcome to come down to the police department and take an evaluation of that. I unfortunately have another commitment this evening, so I won't be available for the remainder of the select board meeting, but I can always be reached at the police department. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chief. Roger, you said there was another public comment?
Yes, I guess I just wanted to say, for like the sake for the public record, is that we owe, which I need to lead on the summary for Herb Durfee on the personal improvement plan progress. And so I just want to state for, I suppose for everyone's benefit that that is owed to him, and that is something that I will get to all of you for your review and likely a subsequent executive session. So I wanted to make that public comment. That's okay.
Yep, and can you put an estimated timeline? Are we looking at next week's meeting
Yeah.
or the first?
We could do that for our, we can have it for our next meeting if we would like to, if the chair finds space in the agenda.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Anything else? Sorry, I have to, if I don't write this down, I'm not going to remember. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion? Anyone
Yeah.
willing to, Mary or Rob? Go ahead, Rob.
First
No, Rob,
time.
you Go ahead, Rob.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I second it.
So motion made by Rob, seconded by Mary. Any further comment or discussion? Hearing none, we'll roll call. Roger,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes,
Rob,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and Claudette's a yes. Moving on to item 4, a letter, proposed letter from the select board to the state regarding cross-border travel for the Ford Sayer program. John, this is your agenda item. Would you like to speak to it?
Sure.
Or do we want to make a motion first and then discuss? Or see if anybody's willing to make a motion?
Sure. Why don't I make the motion and that'll serve as the frame for the discussion.
Okay.
I move to approve for select board signatures this draft letter to Michael Piachik regarding cross-border travel for the Ford Sayer. Okay, I'm going to revise this. Regarding considerations relating to cross-border travel from Vermont, as included in the select board meeting packet, and to mail that letter as addressed.
Is there a
So-
second?
could I have a clarification? So we've eliminated the Ford Sayer program specificity in this?
Correct, because the support letter, the parents that initiated this discussion are concerned about that program in particular, but even in their letter, they talk about in general the implications for other school programs, and the letter that I drafted is much more broad, that just talks about activities in general rather than supporting that specific program despite its many merits.
So is this become completely general, or does it still relate to school-related activities?
Ford Sayer is not a school-related activity.
Correct.
Right,
Correct.
right, but
So
is this in the context of parents wanting their children to have opportunities for recreation, or is this now very, very broad?
no, it's not even as broad as that. So to the extent that it's specific, did we get a second on that motion?
Well-
Given the confusing nature of the, I'm not sure, but
How about I second it, if I may? I'll
Okay.
second it. And
Okay,
then
good.
maybe go into discussion. Is that okay?
yeah,
Okay.
that'd be helpful. Thank you. And so to the extent that it's specific, it is talking about how there's this unfortunate disjunction, right, where our kids are allowed to go to school. That's an essential function, obviously, and they go to school with this group of kids, and so the question is whether outside activities generally, where most, if not all, of the kids interacting are the same group of kids that interact already at school. So because of the nature of outside of school activity, there's definitely some mixing, right? There's I'm not aware of an outside of school activity where it would be limited to just the kids from that one school. But it's still pretty limited within our broader community. And so certainly kids in Norwich can do Norwich Rec stuff. Kids in Hanover can do Hanover Rec stuff. There are a few activities that really by their nature, either what they are, like Fort Sayre, which is skiing. So it's in New Hampshire where there's a mountain and a ski hill, or because they're less popular activities. So like the swim team at UVAC, or maybe dance class at one of the studios over in New Hampshire, or things like that. They draw from a little bit broader area because there's not enough activity just in the one community or the one school to support that activity. And is there scope for flexibility in allowing that sort of thing? And I tried to make this a fairly gentle letter in terms of just encouraging some consideration about these things, in part because Herb had already initiated a discussion on these points. We were all copied on that. There was a good back and forth. I think it's interesting because if you're new to Vermont, or you're not really tied into government stuff, you would maybe be surprised that we had this email that was all of us in the select board plus our reps, Tim Briglin and Jim Maslin, and then Michael Pichek was on the email. It was an email to him and he responded. And so it's one of the great things about where we live is we can interact directly with these folks that are making these decisions. And so, the basic upshot of that email exchange was that they understand the concern. They understand that it's a unique situation, not necessarily just unique to the Upper Valley, but everywhere along the border. There's lots of interaction across the border, and they're aware of that and they're thinking about it. The upshot, and correct me if you saw that differently, Herb, but the upshot I saw was that basically as long as the numbers are going in the wrong direction, they're not going to do anything to loosen the rules right now, but that they're thinking about this and they get that it's an issue and they want to come up with something that's both fair and defensible. So this would be our way to add our voice to that, to encourage that thinking, to encourage that open-mindedness, and to consider how we can be safe, be responsible, but also keep in mind that things like this are, really, and that's where it is specific to the skiing. It's hard to come up with an activity that you can still be active in the winter and be more safe than like being outside skiing, helmet on, like half the days. It's cold enough, you're probably wearing a mask without COVID. The masking is undoubtedly not an issue for the kids to wear their mask all the time. But so to just keep these things in mind and to try to evolve the policy a little.
Select board comments.
Mary has her hand up.
John, could you please state your motion again?
Sure. I move to approve for select board signature the draft letter to Michael Pichek regarding cross-border travel as included in the select board meeting packet, and to mail that letter as addressed.
Okay, thanks.
I think you had consideration 4 before the cross border.
I know, as I did it a second time. I thought that just muddied it. I think it's easier to just take out for the Ford Sayre program.
Just making sure.
Any comments?
Mary, do you still have your hand up?
Yeah, I feel a little nervous about it because, for instance, I think the Ford Sayre program, to me, that makes a lot of sense because there's not a lot of contact there. But if we're talking dance classes, if we're talking, I don't know, it just seems like indoor activities, we're talking contact with, I don't know, community members from other states who might be in contact with others, and just thinking about how this recreational hockey league situation sort of became quite a serious problem in Vermont. It just makes me nervous. So I can see the logic of a conversation about it, but it also seems to me just the way that it's couched that I just don't think I can support it. It just makes me feel too nervous.
Any other, Roger?
So I support this broadly. I think like we absolutely need more progressive and thoughtful policies for border towns. And quite frankly, it's the work of our legislative body and our state officials to think about all of Vermont, of which we are in a unique situation. So I support any kind of localized pressure on that. I think that's an appropriate role of government. Similarly to Mary, I don't really want to talk with specificity, particularly on activities that relate to school programs, and especially because those are the biggest vectors at the moment, at least if you look in, I think, Washington County, for example, right now. So I don't want to muddy the demand for really good, strong, progressive policies for border towns with the specificity of things that don't come to mind as like the priority. Like, you know, right now, my doctor's office, my grocery store, my pharmacy, all of these things are in New Hampshire and they're considered essential. But as things get more intense, as the cases go up, the word essential will be defined differently. And so that word needs to be defined for our unique needs. Do I have to go to a grocery store in Bradford because of, you know, some border arbitrariness? So I would like to maybe amend this a little bit. And because we have a meeting next week, I think we could very easily like maybe work something up and then do it for next week. And I think it would still be timely. So that is my proposal, where I support this broadly, don't necessarily like the specificity of the examples. Does that make sense?
I understand the comment. Yep.
Rob?
As someone who observes Hanover High School activity every day, I would have to say that in general, I've been somewhat impressed with the kids' ability to adhere to the most important aspects of social distancing and so on. And to me, it would be more, you know, an organized, supervised events like we're discussing here are less likely to be problematic than social events, ad hoc social events that the kids just attend on their own. So basically they're saying, I'm not too worried, any more worried about that than just having in-person schooling, which is a whole nother story too.
So I'll add my 2 cents. The state has very specific guidelines on school recreational activities, including cross-border. I also want to point out that the schools currently have each class, at least at Marion Cross, and I'm guessing it's probably very similar at Hanover High, they have their little pods and they don't leave their pod. They don't interact with other kids in other pods. And so the state state guidelines on the school recreation issues consider all of that. And I see a commingling of pods with any kind of non-sanctioned recreation activities, which increases the risk of transmission. I also want to point out very clearly the hockey outbreak was not a result of them playing the hockey playing itself. It was the carpooling, it was the locker room, it was no mask wearing in the cars, with members that were not in your family or whatever. And I can see this similar thing happening with any non-school sanctioned recreational activities that cross the border. 76 cases in Vermont, higher than there were in the spring. Over 200 a day in New Hampshire. It's creeping up. I have had 2 coworkers in the last week who have had to quarantine because of exposure. I am not willing to support this document. I understand the parents' frustration. I'm 65, underlying health issues. No, sorry. I'm cannot support this. Roger.
So what about the suggestion that if it were, I mean, so I guess my question broadly is, do we believe that our legislative body needs to consider the unique needs of border towns? And if the answer is yes, we may wish to think about a revision for next week. If we think no, then in the flow chart, the conversation ends. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think our representatives prior to this most recent uptick in cases submitted a letter to Secretary Pichek asking for consideration and got a very reasoned, I thought, response back stating why the state was not willing to go that route.
Yes, and I appreciate that. But what's interesting about that is it came in a reply from our town manager's message. So in some ways, this idea of local pressure or questioning, as I think what John is trying saying in some regard, adds to the wider conversation for those in power. It reminds them that, you know, I don't necessarily want them to go to Montpelier and advocate for any one particular program, but I do think, you know, that email exchange that we're referring to wasn't on their own initiation, perhaps because they have other things going on, or because they need local pressure from their constituents and their town managers.
And I would argue that they were well aware of the cross-border issues. I don't think it's anything new. They stated that they've heard it from other towns on the border. And after consideration, they weren't willing to reconsider. And I think a week later, given the current situation, I think that initial email was fine, and it was nice. It was great to get a response. I think it should end there.
Oh,
John?
So I appreciate that. I think, Roger, to your point, if you're concerned about the specificity, there's really only one sentence in the letter that refers to specific activities. So we could just remove the last sentence of the second paragraph, which is the example or examples. I think, Claudette, the difference that I'm seeing here is that additional voices matter. And so I think adding our support to the concerns that have already been raised by Tim Briglin and Jim Maslin, it's helpful for them to make that case if they have the support of their constituents, and constituents as both individuals and the towns that they serve. So I do think that, and again, I'm happy to revise any of this language that people think it misses the mark, but I did try to be very cognizant of the fact that they said, look, we're not going to change anything as long as the numbers are going bad. But just to, encourage them to keep this, sort of front of mind as this policy evolves. I don't intend this to be undue pressure to try to get them to soften something in the middle of not knowing exactly what things are doing right now. So, I think, and I would correct. So you're right that the kids in Marion Cross are in pods. You're right that to a lesser but similar extent, they're in pods academically at the high school. In both places, those pods come together for activities. And so my younger son is playing Norwich track basketball right now. He's playing with kids that aren't in his classroom. They're all masked up. They're all being safe. They're all being good. My other son just finished live theater in the Upper Valley. It was amazing. They were able to do that safely, and that was really special. We're one of the very few places that is able to do live theater this year for these kids. That's a key part of their lives. The hockey is a little bit different because there's a few sports that like they're offered in the school. They're school teams, and then there are the more serious travel teams. As far as I've seen, it's been the travel teams that have been the locus of problems. And I'm not surprised to hear that it's maybe from the car rides, because it's that much harder to get people to keep their mask on in a 3-hour drive going to a game than going over to Hanover. But it does seem that that's a little bit unique because we've had a couple of outbreaks that are related to that specific activity of travel hockey. It's been a robust conversation. I'm happy to go to a vote now and just see where we fall. But I certainly am not shy about advocating for, thinking about how we're a little bit different where we are than places in other parts of Vermont.
Any further comment?
So the only thing, I can see now why Mary asked you to repeat the motion. So, okay, so we would be voting on the motion as proposed. That's what I'm hearing. Yes, that's what we do.
Well, if 3 people were going to support it, we could amend the motion and say, amended with the removal of that sentence.
There's a motion and a second on the table. So we can vote on the motion that's on the table, and then if you want to do another motion with a revision to the letter, that's fine.
Offer an amendment to the motion that the motion be to approve the letter with the exception of removing the last sentence in the second paragraph containing the specific examples.
Okay. Never mind.
I can't remember who seconded the motion.
It's Roger.
Yes.
Roger seconded the motion.
So are you seconding that amendment?
So you said the last sentence in the
second paragraph. Yeah. So that sentence said activities that complement those offered in the school, such as skiing, dance, swimming, music, art, scouting, and many similar activities. So we would just take out those examples that you mentioned as being maybe not feeling comfortable with specific examples.
Okay. I think we should go with. I think we should vote. We should go with the motion on the table, and the motion on the table does not include an amendment. Is that right?
Correct. No one's going to second the amendment. Correct. We'll just be voting on the motion.
Okay. So I would propose, Madam Chair, that I'm ready to vote.
So we're voting on the original motion.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unamended motion. Roger.
I'm voting no.
Mary.
No.
Rob.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
And I'm a no.
So that being said, Madam Chair, if I may, I'm happy if there's room in the agenda, if John is willing to, I think it needs more than just that to amend this, but I support the demand. So I'm happy to maybe see a reincarnation of this. I'll say that, perhaps.
Is that for another agenda item another time?
Perhaps, if allowed as part of the agenda amend process. But
okay.
I think we should, yeah.
Maybe think it through a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So then that will move us on to Mount Scottney grant and a report out from Tracy, who is here. And so welcome, Tracy. Name and locatable address. And I don't know if there's information that you want to do a.
I have a presentation. Roger, do I share that with you or who? Should I share it?
You're able to share your own screen if you would like.
Okay. I can do that. And Bree is here as well. Sorry, I wasn't prepared to do that. Okay. Let me pull my presentation up. Miranda, I like your picture. And happy Veterans Day to everyone. I know you're all public servants. As a military family, I consider public servants.
Claudette is a veteran too.
Very
So
good.
only fitting.
Thank you for your service and your service here. All right, so I want to take, thank you for having me, and also Bree is here and Roger, who participated in the Mount Ascutney grant. We came to celebrate and share some of the parts of the grant. We could be here for a lot longer to talk about every part of it, but excuse me if I'm repeating things as we had covered throughout the grant period, but there was a lot of information. So I just kind of wanted to bring everybody to the same page. Some key items that I wanted to cover tonight in our 10 minutes. I wanted to leave time for Q&A. So first, why this grant? What
Tracy, sorry to
strategy?
interrupt, but if you were meaning to be sharing your screen, we're not seeing it.
Oh, you're not? I'm sorry.
Roger, you're muted.
I can do it, Tracy. Here you go.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Okay.
You see it now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Okay. I gotta find my toggle. There we go. Okay. So, celebrations and sharing key items to cover tonight. Why this grant? What strategies did partners bring and prioritize in this grant? It was really February to June that we were live with the grant, and then initially, and then a good start, COVID precautions, interruptions, transitions, new strategy for April to September as there was an extension, and capacity building, progress and results, and then what's next, and time for question and answers. So why did this grant come about? So as you all know, I have community health background, very passionate about health of our community. I have an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old. So this is something that's on my radar is health, particularly of our youth and our general community health. And that has many factors, as any illness or disease prevention. So particularly related to with youth. So I can get into that a little bit. And then also parents and community activities, participating in community health groups. So there was a number of community groups that I was working with where there was a disconnect between Norwich and also Norwich access to the same community groups, the same relationship with, particularly at Richmond Middle School. After 7th grade, as many of you know, the kids go over to the schools and they're encouraged to have youth leadership, which is lovely. But then the parents, there was a disconnect as far as keeping parents involved and also helping parents to support healthy youth involvement instead of just unsupervised wandering around Hanover or the like. Engaging in community output around zoning regulations from previous conversations with us all, talking about we need more community input regarding age limited substance, such as if cannabis it was to be legalized. Is that something that the community wants to opt in or opt out? And this was an opportunity to get more community input. Originally, we thought of, we had hoped and we're working with a third party to do that. But unfortunately, well, we'll get into that. Anyway, so again, 7th to 12th graders, youth, school, and activities, more to do in Hanover and not so much in Norwich. And then, as I said, with Richmond Middle School and Hanover, more activities to engage youth and their parents. Also, the youth risk behavior survey was showing an increase in youth using of substance, and I can get into that in a little bit. And then this grant presented an opportunity to address some of these things, and some of our local organizations that dedicated to youth wanted to support youth and increase opportunities for youth. As you know, so there's different ways of looking at risk versus protective. So like if you're looking at preventing diabetes, you would have risk, doing risky things that might increase your risk of getting diabetes or your genetic disposition. But protective things might be exercising, maintaining a body weight, regular checkups with your physicians. This is the difference in risk, which is the first column here. So for youth, risks are school failure, low commitment to school, association with drug using peers, not college bound, aggression towards peers, norms, favorable towards alcohol use and other use, accessibility of substances. And then protective factors would be presence of mentor support for development of skills, opportunity for engaging within school, community, positive norms, clear expectation for behaviors, and physical and psychological safety. So in our community in 2017, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which is middle school and high school, I'm going to share the high school results, that 28% of high schools had drunk alcohol and 17% smoked marijuana within the past 30 days. At grade 12, 49 of the high school seniors reported drinking alcohol in the past 30 days, and 29 of those had reported binge drinking, which is categorized as 5 drinks or more at one time. 29% of high school seniors reported smoking marijuana, and these were all above the Vermont median. The concern was large number of high school students, especially seniors, engaging in underage drinking and marijuana use. So we needed to look at a different way of addressing this. Also within the youth risk behavior, we've noticed that there has been a decrease in adult disapproval of alcohol use at the high school level, and that went from 77% to 66%. And 34% of students said that their parents didn't mind if they drank alcohol. So, and also student perception of harm had also been impacted, that 72% of students didn't believe marijuana as harmful. So, you know, these can be argued, but this is the statistics. So the concern is use of substance as becoming more normalized, more of a norm. And so trying to figure out a effective way to raise adult awareness of underage drinking, and also to raise teen awareness of the health consequences or just impact of underage drinking. So then the third thing was that the concern of mental health and community connection. 67% of middle school students and 72% of high school students reported that in their community they felt like they mattered. So on the flip side, that's 33% of middle schoolers and 28% of high schoolers did not answer that they felt their community mattered, that they mattered to their community. So the identified need was to figure out ways of strengthening social supports, changing community norms, and involving youth leadership. So of those, you know, we could have focused on the risk factors, such as the norms favorable to use, but we really wanted to focus more on positive norms and presence of mentors supporting for development of skills and interests, and so that's what we did. And so the Mount Ascutney grant was, if you see at the bottom, is it stems from the federal government, a grant from SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Agency within the Department of Health and Human Services. They awarded a grant to Mount Ascutney Hospital and the Vermont Department of Health as a collaboration. They sent out a call for proposal out to the communities within Windsor County and Orange County, I believe, but definitely Windsor County. And so we were awarded after writing a lengthy proposal, and the town of Norwich was the financial agent for that. Okay, so, sorry, okay. So what strategies did we prioritize with the grant in February and to June? So we really wanted to build on the existing organizations that were working on prevention, both mostly on the protective factor side and building those up and getting to know each other, building relationships. We wanted to gauge public interest or support for Norwich to have more substance-free community events and also establish zoning regulations to limit vending of age-limited products. And then third, build and support youth leadership, youth involvement. And fourth, based on evidence-based Icelandic model of drastically reducing use of substance amongst youth, is increasing pro-social substance-free youth activities. And we wanted to do that in Norwich and also within the SAU. And then hire a grant coordinator and also provide consulting time to do the above. Okay, let's see here. Okay, here's a list of ideas that we had, and we had organized to the date, time, arrangement, and unfortunately, many of these did not happen. So we were basically trying to increase availability in Norwich for youth almost every Friday night for something to do. And also we were trying to engage, like the police department was involved, the library, brainstorming, the high school, the middle school, even the bookstore wanted to support as much as we could each other, as well as the faith-based organizations were on board to help. And so we had a great start. We had a wonderful parents check-in with the Richmond Middle School new principal and new associate principal at Marion. We had them hosted them at Marion Cross, and realized how much it meant to the parents to build a relationship with the administration of RMS and also to better understand what's going on, and also to support and understand Hanover, not having access to phone numbers of kids, families, and ways to set up outside of school activities. We had a successful kids' night out February 14th. Youth in Action came over to help us with that. And it was wonderful. There was youth mentoring youth. We had, sorry for the typo. We had high schoolers who volunteered their time so that 30 kids K-6 could participate in this night out, as well as families could enjoy Valentine's Day. And it was great. And it was a really neat event. And a lot of the parents got to know who Youth in Action were for the future. Nordic in Norwich was an intergenerational event. It was lovely. It was a very cold day. We had all these trail plans, basically showing off all the great things in Norwich to do in the winter. A lot of ice skaters and other activities. It was really nice, and it was multi-generational, which was lovely. And the folks that came mostly for pickleball all said, yes, more intergenerational activities. So then we moved on to March 2nd. I did a survey, or we did a survey at town hall meeting asking residents for them to support or to say if they supported or not, 1 to 5, how they felt about supporting additional after-school activities for K-12. And I submitted those results last week. But overall, it was very positive. People said 3 or 4 for 7th to 12th graders. They definitely wanted to support the youth. The intergenerational was more like a 5. And also, in dovetailing our previous conversation about the opt-in or opt-out, if the state of Vermont goes to recreational cannabis, do we want to have local controls? And the question was, do you believe we should have local control of recreational marijuana, such as alcohol, liquor licenses? And the response was in favor of that. And then would you like to see a local vendor of recreational cannabis in Norwich? And the answer to that was mostly ones or not in favor. So, and that was 65 residents that were at town hall. And again, I'd be happy to share all those with you all. We also attended a results-based accountability. It's an evaluation training that was Miranda, Bree, and I. So another evaluation opportunity. And then we developed partnerships, again, planning for most Fridays until June, but those were mostly canceled, unfortunately, due to COVID. So new strategies, we had to go through a whole new application process, and we were approved of that. So we decided to build bridges with the parent community at RMS and developed a PTO so that Norwich residents would have more of a voice and would have a natural vehicle to be able to work side by side and get a relationship going with administration. And it has been very positive, and Norwich is so much more represented. A lot of the hiccups in the transition, especially this year, were smoothed out very quickly through that vehicle. And I'm very happy to say that things are going well with that. Youth leadership opportunities for middle school and high school all were online. You heard from a group last week. There was also another group that was called Kids oh my gosh, Kids Save the Earth. I'm blanking right now, but we basically, it was for middle schoolers. We invited all these middle schoolers to come together and brainstorm what they wanted to address. They wanted to address the environment and save animals. And so they end up building bat houses and doing the victory gardens. So it was amazing. So, and we had a community member who had a tree fallen, chopped up his wood at the mill, made bat houses so that the kids could assemble them. It was amazing. So I have the feeling that I'm really running out of time or have gone past time. So I'm gonna skip ahead here, and I'm happy to share my presentation. But anyways, we wanted to do public safety announcements and community awareness, welcoming new people. A lot of that got changed, but at the end of the day, we built a lot of capacity, and the partnerships within the organizations have grown to appreciate youth leadership, youth voices, and we have now equipment to grow these opportunities. For example, we invested in speaker systems and picnic tables and lanterns and hula hoops, all things for outdoor distancing events, such as our Halloween activity benefited from purchasing those kind of things for the future, as well as a subscription for an anime club that came from the youth as a need. So that will be an online activity coming soon. So what we want to take away is basically youth want to be involved, and they have leadership skills and abilities to participate and give to Norwich when given the support and opportunity. So what's next? The grant funding, we applied for it for a second year. We did not get it as for funding for time and safe places for youth to meet, to study, hang out. But the grant sources are not doing in person, but we will continue partnerships and collaboration for the youth.
Okay, Tracy, do you have? I don't want to sound rude, but I would like you to wrap up.
Yeah, that's it. This is my wrap up slide. So are there question and answers?
Are there
questions? And I can help with answers, and Bree or anybody.
Questions from the board?
Mary has her hand up, Claudette.
Mary?
Yeah, I think it sounds very worthwhile for the kids. I'm wondering what makes it sustainable into the future.
Right. So that's an excellent question. And that's been at the top of the questions from the beginning. In our first meeting with the Rec Council, oh, Bree, do you want to talk about our first meeting at Rec Council? Are you on? No. Okay. So we met with Rec Council, and that was from the very beginning. We wanted to be sustainable. Every activity, we made sure that it was financially responsible. The youth in action activity on February 14th, Valentine's Day, we wanted it to be replicated, but we wanted this grant to be a venue where they could try new things without feeling nervous that they would lose money, or because it was a new thing that they wouldn't want to risk it. So that event paid for itself. And so as well as the other ones, we'll need to figure out how to go forward with that, such as Tunes on the Trail. We're going to, the youth will have to fundraise or find other venues to support that. But it's definitely been part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
Tracy, sorry, I am here. I just
Oh,
couldn't
good.
unmute myself for some reason. So
Oh.
sorry about that.
No worries.
So I do think that this is sustainable because it goes right along with the promoting mentoring with youth from our Rec Council, which I think they've done a really great job. So I do think we're going to just keep wrapping in the teens and trying to get them to give their voice to what we are already doing and have them have a say in what they want to see in Norwich. And that I don't think that that's going to be something we need to be throwing money at. We just need to be throwing our attention and our ears to it.
Yes, and the PTO right now is trying to figure out how to become their own nonprofit. So that will be something of the future to sustain for parents going forward in that network building. And also other organizations are committed to youth and have a different lens of and respect for youth leadership and youth voices going forward. And we'll have a different mindset with that.
Roger, did you have a comment or a question?
I had a question. Mine was a little more administrative. So obviously I think this is great. Like the library was involved in a little bit for the advisory council, and the anime club will hopefully be a part of the library program. So I think it's great, particularly in capacity, getting like agencies to talk to each other and like, yes, have their an adjusted focus from youth-led ideas. I think that's great. And I think it's great that it's a role of government, that they're facilitating it. Now I have boring administrative questions. maybe Herb can help us with them. So this was a $25,000 grant, and is it true that 11,000 of the funds were expended? Is that right? Is that what I'm seeing?
No, it actually went with the extension. It was 31,000.
Okay, and all of that was expended?
No,
Okay.
no, not all of it was expended. It was, I believe it's 27.5. I have to get that number for you, but I can get that. I have it right here.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
Well, maybe just Herb can follow up with us with that question in the future. And then Herb, I guess the other question too, and then how much of it was in wages versus programmatic activities, which is also something I'm interested in.
Yes, it was, wages were a little bit less than 50%.
Okay.
Sorry, I have people coming to say hi. And equipment was the lion's share of it for the other expenses.
So to that question about capacity, would a recommendation be that in order to have these additional programmatic outputs from a town or from a department, would staffing be a crucial part of that, would we say? Maybe that's a Herb or Bree question, which could be rhetorical. They could think about it.
I think for starting a program like that, it was crucial. I don't think for sustaining a program like this, it is crucial. It was really helpful to have Tracy's help and in building the Youth Advisory Council, just like it was really helpful to have your help with it. But personally, I do think that this is something that is not going to be a big staff cost later. But I do think it was important building it.
Right, and we're growing volunteers at each activity. So that's the goal too, is also to grow membership, not only the youth, but also vetted adults that can support going forward.
Great, these are my questions, thanks.
Yeah, and also another piece of that, so once it's reimbursed through the town, then it goes to Mount Ascutney Hospital for reimburse, and we've submitted everything for reimbursement. So we should be 100% zero soon, and would be happy to report when that happens.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to move us along since we are like quite far behind on our agenda. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bree. Brings us up to the Woody Adams motion. Is there anybody willing to make that motion?
Sure, I'll make that. I move to name the Adams parcel and its associated contiguous forest conservation project the Woody Adams Conservation Forest in perpetuity with appropriate durable and permanent signage at all trailheads and labeling on all town maps.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Is there discussion? Seeing none, we'll roll call. Motion made by John, Mary, seconded by Mary. Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mary,
Yes,
Rob,
Yes,
John,
Yes.
and Claudette's a yes. Thank you. And I think Craig will appreciate that greatly. Next item is renewal of the NEMRIC bulk time agreement. Herb, this is, well, actually, let's, someone willing to make a motion on this one?
yeah, I'll do it. I move to approve the NEMRIC bulk time purchase agreement as contained in the select board meeting packet and to authorize the town manager to sign said agreement.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by Roger. Excuse me, any discussion?
Mary has her hand up.
Just a question about the bulk time agreement. If we should get another, get a new finance director, will this agreement, or, I mean, is this sort of committing us to spending a certain amount, or is it sort of an up to amount as far as services needed?
It commits you to to a minimum amount at the hourly rate that's there for the number of hours, but it is usable not just in the finance office. For instance, the listers, if they have questions on their grand list module or what have you, those folks can benefit from the time that Cynthia's been, at least Cynthia's been our contact from the time frame. It's used for training. So actually with a new finance director coming on board, it's actually timely to have this updated because NEMRIC is going to have to do some training of the new finance director. It wouldn't be just in the hands of Becky as a for instance.
Okay, thank you.
John?
So this is talking about as of September 15th. So this is looking backwards then?
It's a little bit retroactive because technically the original bulk time arrangement expired either the tail end of August or what have you. So we've still been using the services of Cynthia, but just on the hourly rate basis.
Right, okay.
Any other questions?
I mean, I suppose I just wish in general that it was more descriptive I mean, you mentioned trainings and obviously that's fine. That makes sense, but it's
As in what specific services?
yeah, kind of, but I think it's one of those situations where I suppose that if it's being recommended that this is to use this, and I also recognize that we probably don't necessarily need our approval to do something like this. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but
No, you do need to approve this because it exceeds certain amounts and all that sort of stuff. And it's for it's for professional services.
I see. So I suppose in general, I'm always wanting a more specificity and a clue on process and how it would be used. But if I trust your recommendation that this gets us this provides training and support.
Right. The specificity that came in with regard to the first bulk time agreement, which was really that Cynthia came in and served as the finance director, and Becky was a temporary person that we hired. A lot of that effort was not only training Becky and providing other forms of technical assistance upon request, such as Misaki in the lister's office if she needed some help, that was available as part of the agreement. But also what Cynthia did is really focused on those matters of the finance director, the audit, the making sure that that the trial balance was ready for the audit, helping Becky in understanding. I mean, obviously a lot of it had to do with training Becky as well in how to use NEMRIC. The same thing is occurring with regard to the renewal of this. There is continual work that's been going on with regard to the audit, training Becky. There is going to be a new finance director at some point here, and that will also take up a bunch of time with regard to this.
Okay, can I have a follow-up? Is that okay, Claudette?
Sure.
So Herb, is it possible to hold off on this until you have a finance director in place and develop that specificity with them? I guess
No.
I'm concerned. No. Okay, so I guess
Because I'm just, I was just handed a draft audit. So if there are questions come up by the board or what have you,
I see.
I need that. And Becky utilizes the services of Cynthia fairly regularly as well. So I mean, is it going to be the end of the world? No, but my recommendation is that the answer to that question is I need that person.
No, because of the timing. Okay, because it's like, it's $10,000 plus. Okay. All right, I'm done. Thank you.
Any other questions?
We have a public comment. Cheryl Lindbergh has her hand up.
Hold on, I've lost my screen here. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Hi, Cheryl Lindbergh, 59 Koch Road. My only question is just an accounting question, Herb. I notice when these payments are made to NEMRIC that they're being expensed to the finance officer wage line item, and I'm curious why they're not being tracked under a contractual line item expense.
So I've answered this before. The reason is that's essentially where the money is, and that we've done a sub line item under there so that we can differentiate between a cost related to personnel versus this contractual obligation, which is kind of a contracted salary service.
Oh, you're saying there's a sub account to the finance?
I think there's a 0.01 or something like that underneath from that, because you asked the question before with a concern about putting it under a personnel related thing and getting into the taxing situation. So I made sure that we made that separation was made.
Okay, I did not understand that to be the case. So thank you for explaining that. It just seems like it should be, because you mentioned it's professional services, that it would be tracked outside of that wage line item. It doesn't make a difference how many line items you have, right? Because the money's there in a different place. That's all. I just wanted clarification. Thanks.
So if I may, then now I have a follow-up question to that, if I may.
Sure.
So why do that as opposed to put in a line item transfer to professional services if more money was needed under, I suppose that could be an option. I guess I'm not advocating for one way or another. I wouldn't know, but I guess now I'm curious. So if we actually have a finance director that is drawing wages, it would make sense to then do some drawing. This would be under professional services then.
There's actually, which I've just discovered, is that there actually is an old professional services budgeted line item in the chart of accounts under the finance director. So the possibility of journal entering the past stuff into that and starting to charge there is a possibility. The only reason why I've kept it where it is just for consistency's sake at this point.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, then let's take a vote. Roger, how do you vote?
Yes, but not happily.
Mary?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, and share the not happily, but that's okay. Next.
Can I interrupt and ask why you're unhappy about it? Because this is, to me, is like an invaluable service right now. Absolutely invaluable.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I'm happy to answer if that's okay. But,
Sure.
I think I think because it's communicated that it's a need, and I want everything that you communicate is a need to keep our finance office like robust and healthy. I totally support and trust your judgment. Absolutely, you have my confidence in that. Just to be clear, but it's. I guess I had I hoped for a different process with this. I think we're investing a lot of money into training for a software program that has been openly argued and contested. So it's just a sort of confluence of just being concerned if this is the best use of the public's money, and then just wanting to be in a different place with the position. But I also recognize that we made a lot of progress on that. So I'm allowed to register, disappointment, and then also own my own role in that too, if that makes sense.
I understand that. The reason why I'm asking you is that this particular item, or the behind the item particularly pertains to me. So it's very important to understand from my standpoint, where I stand in this particular process of this town. And as you mentioned in the beginning part of the meeting, it's taxing because technically I don't have anything from writing from the board since the vote back in December. I've had a couple different meetings with regard to some input, but I get the feeling that there's sometimes a level of innuendo that I'm concerned about. I mean, I think you can understand because I'm hypersensitive in the situation. So what I've tried to do is my best over the course of, since we had the business email compromises, to get that office as back to normal, whatever that is, as possible. And the bulk time arrangement with regard to NEMRIC, because it is the system that we have.
Yeah.
And until the town decides to use a different system, I have to rely on professional services related to that in order to train the folks and those that use it. Because when Becky came on board, she knew nothing about NEMRIC. She knew nothing about Norwich and its finances. Roberta came back and fixed up the books and everything, but we seriously had to rely on Cynthia, not only to bring that person online, but we also had an audit that had to be done during the time frame that the business email scams were being cleaned up. So
yeah,
the value of that has been really important and it continues because the audit has just been draft completed yesterday or the day before, and there's still some work to be had on that. And I'm later on I'm going to talk about it verbally in my report, but I think of the people that we've interviewed for the finance director, of the 3 that we've interviewed, there's definitely a number of those that could be the finance director. So trying to finish that up. So I think that this plays in nicely and in a timely fashion for what services that we need. And you may recall, and I'm sorry for babbling, Madam Chair, but one of the major criticisms that I took back a year or so ago was lack of onboarding for staff. And I think that the NEMRIC onboarding with regard to this bulk time arrangement is that professional service that you need for this person.
and that's great, and I appreciate that explanation, and feel free to have made it before I made my promise you not innuendo comment.
I get it, and I don't mean to be stern.
No, it's great.
I am tired from dealing with a budget and everything the last several weeks, pretty much nonstop. But again, the finance office, and based upon what the board has said to me in executive session with regard to the finance office, that's where my hypersensitivity is coming in at this point.
I appreciate the larger context for your recommendation, regardless of how I maybe triggered it, with apologies.
I'm going to move us on to the policy update. And I have to, Herb, what I'm not sure of is if I had sent to Herb just one change, and I am pulling up the policy now, hold on. So there's a draft of my potential revision. Yep. I'm not gonna fall on a sword about this. If people were happy with the initial language versus my attempt to clarify, fine.
I went out and sought the insight of Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and then a little bit of Susan Gilfillan, just because it's an appendix to the contract. VLCT did not have an issue with the language that you had drafted. The concern behind it was just because it was workers' comp related, if there was going to be some kind of federal regulation or rule that drove why VLCT had this in their model. That was the only reason why I checked up on it. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't doing something wrong for workers' compensation.
No, I understand that completely. So
Yeah.
I guess my first, for clarity's sake, do people want to leave the draft policies as is or change that one section to the language that I propose? That's number one. And if we want to go with what is already written, then I will entertain a motion. Maybe that's a good way to work. Mary?
I'd like to leave the language as is, and I'd like to make the motion. So I should
Oh.
do that.
That's fine with me.
Okay. I move to approve as a second reading the draft incident reporting, medical treatment, and accident investigation policy as presented in the select board packet, and to adopt said policy.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. So Herb, I just want us all to be very clear. The original draft policies are the ones that we are voting on. No changes to what you submitted as the initial draft.
Gotcha.
Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes?
Rob?
Yes.
John? Sorry, John, I didn't.
Muted.
That's a yes. Okay, and that takes us. Can I flip-flop this? Can we take a break now?
Yes. I
And
think
we'll
it's a
come
good
back to
idea.
the town manager report?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so it's 8:05, so 8:15. We'll be back.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Meeting for the 11th of November. And Mary just pointed out that we have a second motion pertaining to the policies that that thankfully she just picked up. And
Well, I was just moving on and noticed it, so.
so are you willing to make that motion?
Sure. I move to approve as a second reading the draft transitional return to work program policy as presented in the select board packet, and to adopt said policy.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
So motion made by Mary, seconded by Roger. Any discussion on this policy? Seeing none, we'll roll call. And my screen is shifted. So John, how do you vote?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes?
Rob?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Sorry, glad you picked that up.
Well, it was on the second page, so we just sort of blew by it.
Okay. Herb, we're over to you for your report. And understanding completely why it's a verbal. So just to put that out there.
Thank you. And I will try to get something written to you as soon as I possibly can once I get out of the budget, out from underneath the budget rock. But so basically a couple of things I just want to highlight. We've obviously I've been working mostly on the budget and the capital budget related. As I mentioned earlier, we've just received the draft audit, which is nice. That's trying to do interviews and audit and a budget all in the same week is hard. Just to let everybody know, that's one of those questions where you ask yourself, what's the priority? And the answer is yes. So, but the audit seemed to come out fairly well. You'll get a copy of it as part of the, when I give you the detailed budget process. And either if you want a binder of paper, I'll give you a binder of paper. If you just want it digitally in a Dropbox type of thing, I'll do that. I know that some board members, I see Langus, I know he's not a paper guy, so we might, but if you're a binder person, I'll do that. And we can talk about that in the future, but the audit will be part of that. It looks like the undesignated fund balance is in a restored state, which is nice, among some other stuff. The only thing that I didn't get from the audit so far is first, we did not have to do a single audit this year, so things will be a little bit less expensive in the grand budget scheme. And then there's a management letter that comes, and that has not been either prepared or distributed to me yet. Obviously, the business email compromises will be part of that as a deficiency, or I don't know if it'll be a material or of a significant weakness, but it'll be one of those two. So that'll be part of it, but I'm hoping that nothing else pops up there. Well, you already know the union contract's been signed, working on the retroactive pay that we're owed. So working with Becky to, I've got most of that worksheet already done from dealing with it, but I have to have her verify information and go back through timesheets, especially as it relates to when there was overtime and all that. So if you hear from anybody some grumbling or something, it's not for lack of wanting to get it done. It just takes a little time to do it. I guess we have a couple personnel matters going on, but the most recent one with regard to the possibility of age discrimination is going on. I would like at some point, probably Claudette, to give you a quick update in executive session on that. There has been a independent investigator that's, I think, is almost done her work. And we had to have a couple other people get interviewed, so that's the only thing that's taken us a little bit longer than was necessary. But if I could just, I think that's a quick one in executive session, maybe at the next meeting. Interviews, we've completed the interviews for the finance director. In my mind, there actually are 3 of 3 candidates that could sit in the position. What I still need to do, because not everybody could make the last interview, is I'm just Miranda's helping to pull the group together for a little bit of a joint discussion to see if we've got some general, I'm hoping for unanimous consensus on who the folks would recommend toward me in terms of a hire from that standpoint. But I think I am pleased. Each person is different, but I am pleased that we had a nice group of folks that we interviewed with that, it's always pleasant to be able to have a hard decision to make rather than an easy decision to make. So I think we'll be able to make an offer of employment to one of these 3, subject to the comments back from the folks. We may need to do a set of follow-up finalist interviews, but that's the purpose of having this particular discussion. And we're trying to have that discussion either by the end of this week or early next week, so I can get back to the candidates. Generators, you haven't really heard stuff from this, most recently, but we were able to finally get the Tracy Hall generator fixed with regard to the control panel. We had it running, but we discovered after we had it running that the control panel, the automatic control panel, wasn't working well. So now we've cribbed together the Tracy Hall generator. So that'll probably, we're hoping it'll limp for at least 8 months to a year, which will allow us budget-wise to try to get some more designated funds set aside for the generator replacement here. The other good news is that the generator up at the public safety building can be used for the public's for the highway garage. So we're in the middle of getting the new one at the public safety building. The current one there will go to the highway garage, and then we'll have to get a new one here for Tracy Hall, but at least temporarily we've got that crib together to hold off for a while. A question that Bonnie has had, which would be helpful to understand. This is the time of year when the Health and Human Service agencies go out and get petitions for the other monetary articles. A lot of the questions that are coming in are whether you want them to get petitions under a COVID timeframe or just take their request for amounts of money. The way I'm at least looking at it at this point is if they're similar to your policy, if it's the same, they don't have to do a petition. I'm just taking it. But there is a group like the Vermont Nurses Association that is raising their amount. And typically you would make them go get a new petition with signatures. Bonnie and I think that we should just forego that for this year on a just for this one-time year basis for those organizations that are existing. But the question still lingers on if there's a new organization that comes in that's never been another monetary article before, are you willing to forego the petition for a year, or do you still want them to go out and get signatures on a petition? Any thoughts on that?
Anybody have any thoughts? John?
I would think that a new one should have to still do the petition. But I understand not requiring it for folks renewing.
Is that's sort of our unofficial policy, but there's nothing, if they come before the board and there's not, we can put things on the ballot measure ourselves.
Right. They could submit in submitting a letter, you could decide on your own to put it on or not, regardless of whether there's a petition or not. But if they submit a petition, then you have to put it on. Yeah. So would you, so as a, for instance, with the Vermont Nurses Association, John, would you be okay with them? They've always been on, but this is the first time in many years that they're updating their account. Normally that requires the need to go get a petition, or because they're existing, would you allow them in?
I would want to know how much they're increasing, what the increase would be.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the purpose of it, I think, is just a recognition that we have a generous town. So any of these that get on the ballot, they invariably get approved and funded. So having some sort of threshold of support there, I think, is important. But yeah, I agree with Claudette. Kind of depends on how significant the change is, I guess.
Yep.
Mary has her hand up.
Mary?
If a group submits a petition, don't we have to consider it?
If it's petitioned, yes. What we've been getting questions on is in a pandemic situation, are you do you still want the petitions?
I guess I would want, if it's a new organization, I would want them to at least present to the board.
Okay.
That'd be my bias.
I think that would be fair.
Rob?
I would think there'd be some way to do telephone surveying. Whatever organization was asking for money could do some sort of a telephone survey and then put together an electronic Google form or sign up or something. That would at least give them the appearance of public support.
Mm-hmm. Sure. The Visiting Nurses Association is going up 18.5%. So it's going from 15,600 to 18,500.
And Herb, do you know if, I know for the elected positions, ballots didn't need to be submitted, but is this something that we need to pass by the Secretary of State's office?
This particular question?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. I would check with Bonnie. I'm almost assuming that Bonnie may have asked that, but I don't know, only because she asked me. So I'll have to check back with her to see if she's talked to the Secretary of State. And the same question probably applies with regard to elected officials for town meeting coming up, because the deadline will be what, the tail end of January, so.
That will all probably depend on if the governor extends the, yeah, anyway. So if Bonnie can reach out to the Secretary of State and see what their recommendations are, what they're asking.
Yep.
And I think an 18% increase warrants a presentation, or at least some, no, Roger's making a face.
There's always, yeah, they could, I'm fine with materials in a packet and
Yeah.
pulling if we want to discuss it. Yeah, I think there's always two ways, right? There's the ballot measure, and then there's, pleading with your elected officials so they can put it on the ballot. And I think during a pandemic, they may wish to test their luck on the other option, talking to us, and we could put it on for them if we're convinced. But yeah, I agree. They should have materials in the packet and we can review or pull it. So, but yeah. So
there's
sorry,
usually a meeting.
There's
usually a meeting that you have that where you invite those that are the other monetary article folks to come in and talk should they choose to. You usually don't get a lot, but that would be the opportunity. Okay.
So I guess what I'm hearing is that if the Visiting Nurse Association can send us some packet material with an explanation or justification for their funding request increase. And then Herb's going to follow up with Bonnie to see if she's contacted the Secretary of State about petitioning for new people. Sound like a plan?
That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. And on behalf of Bonnie, thanks as well. I just want to let one thing that we've been getting all kinds of positive feedback with regard to the success of the Norwich walk, if I pronounced that correctly, during Halloween at the Milt Fry Park. I've received at least probably a dozen emails that got stuck in Bree's personnel file, so that I think there was a lot of people that participated and helped out with that, so a lot of good success there. They may be looking to do another project called Norwich Nailed It, which is going to be a collaboration with King Arthur Flour, Willing Hands, the Norwich Creamery, to do basically, it's an online cooking competition where you are given some of the products, such as a 3-pound bag of flour from King Arthur Flour, and then you have to go make the recipe. You're not taught how to make it, but you make the recipe, and so there's a little bit of a competition. So there seems to be a lot of interest in town to do that. Right, for the open meeting law training, we're over 50 persons right now, so that's a good number of folks. I think we've had a good chunk of questions asked. Claudette, the DRB, the Planning Commission had some, and Historic Preservation, and there were a couple other individual questions. So I think that there was some good questions for Norwich that have been asked, and I know that the two guys have been receiving them and look forward to doing the presentation. The Beaver Meadow Road sidewalk, the next public forum is tomorrow night. Similar Zoom meeting, and what they'll be going through there, it's up on the little tiny URL right now, is the draft of the alternatives that's out there. And I think they've done a pretty good job of putting that study together so far. And the evening's discussion will be the emphasis that it's a draft, that these are the alternatives that they've come up so far. So they'll be looking for feedback, not only on those alternatives, but if somebody has any other alternatives, or is there a combination or one or more of the alternatives that might suit? And obviously the alternatives also includes the no build scenario. So looking forward to having another lively discussion tomorrow night. And then lastly, I'm in the process of getting an air quality consultant on board to evaluate Tracy Hall, mostly for two reasons. One, for the air quality concerns with regard to COVID, and especially if we're coming into more of a lockdown. I want to see what we can and cannot do in Tracy Hall based on a professional's knowledge in terms of the background, but juxtaposed with CDC guidelines or everything else that's out there. And then also it's kind of a follow-up to the Tracy Hall vote that went down, where we talked about having the building come up to code with regard to air quality. And I want to make sure that as part of that evaluation that if there is anything that we do need to come up to code for, we do meet the code from 1994 when we rehab this building, and usually there's grandfather provisions from that. But again, just having a professional evaluation to tell us what we may need to do or what might be the priority of things to deal with is what I'm dealing with. So I don't have anything scheduled right now, but there's a professional group out of Randolph area that does this, and so that right now Bree is actually serving as my delegate to getting that set up. So that's it, because I know you don't want me to get into all the gory details, everything. Those are sort of some of the highlights. As I can get you a written report, I will. And but again, most of my time's been focused on the budget most recently. So if you have any questions of me, please let me know.
Thanks, Herb.
Anyone have any questions? I just have one. Is there even a tentative date for possibly Bonnie presenting the audit report?
Oh, so I haven't. No, I haven't talked about that. But I mean, I always try to get Bonnie in here, or whomever the auditor is, before, like during the budget process. So anytime between now and the middle of December, I'll try to get her in. But thank you for the reminder.
All right. If there's nothing more, we will move on. Sorry, now I just had a shiver. To the budget discussion. And Roger, did you had a comment, or you had a process question, I believe, or process comment or something?
Yeah, I guess for me, my questions for maybe, I guess, directed to you, Claudette, would be our goals for this, knowing that we don't want to get into too much detail, but knowing that we want to set ourselves up for success, and knowing that we got a big draft of a document at 6 p.m. from Herb as kind of a handout, as he says. How do, would it be thinking about process? Do we sort of calendar some dates out? Do we have a process for, in terms of what kind of documents that we still need or require? I guess thinking about like deliverables of this discussion was just what I was curious about. If that could be proposed at the top of our discussion, that would be really helpful for me. So that was my comment.
I can go over some of the specific dates that at least traditionally that you've dealt with, such as usually it's the 3rd Thursday of January. That is the last possible time frame that you have to finish up the budget, to recommend it to voters to meet the requirements. So the 3rd Thursday is January 21st. What I always like to say is if you could finish it up a few days before that, so that if there are any additional changes that I have to do to prepare it with regard to getting everything ready for Bonnie on the warrant and everything, that's appreciated. But so if you can think of trying to get it done at the last, it's Martin Luther King week that you'd have to be done with that.
Okay, so January 14th is a meeting, a regular meeting, right? Yes.
January 13th.
13th. Oh, sorry, January 13th.
And then what we did last year, which I think you liked, was to basically have 2 sort of like back-to-back meetings where it was just the presentation by the folks with regard to the budget, so that you got through the budget at least once over the court with the budget presentations by everybody. So you basically had that overall budget thing done within a couple days time frame. And you also usually offer one meeting to, as I just mentioned earlier, with regard to the other monetary article, the Health and Human Service agencies that would like to be able to come in and talk to you folks should they choose to. That typically is the first meeting in December, but it doesn't have to be either.
And last year we didn't have them come.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yep.
So
And I would like to not have them come unless it's a very specific select.
So I'm sorry, and I only Claudette, if you want to continue this conversation, I can throw out some dates. I'm looking at a calendar.
Can I,
Yeah.
This is what I was thinking.
Okay.
And I don't have calendar immediately before me, but do we have, does anybody know off, or can anybody see off the top of their heads when our December meeting dates are?
Yes. So you will be meeting next week. Well, November, you'll meet November 18th. And then your regular meetings in December are December 9 and December 23rd.
Okay.
If you went the first, third, and fifth Wednesdays of the month, that would be the 2nd, the 16th, and the 30th.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps, but
Yeah, it kind of does. So in Herb's email with the budget material, the capital budget is expected to be in our hands by next week.
yeah, I would like to be similar to like I did today in emailing it to you on the day of the meeting. The same thing would occur this coming Wednesday, a week from today. If I can get it done, if I get it to you earlier, I will, but the drop dead would be next Wednesday.
Okay. And the some other supporting documents from the departments by the end of this week.
By the end of this week, everything operational budget wise you'll have. So everything capital budget wise you'll have next week.
So how, what I would propose is that we split up our department presentations, and I think we did 3 on one.
You did a public works as one whole sort of night. You did public safety related, which is like police, fire, and emergency management, and then you kind of did everything else, all other general government. So I think you had 3 general parts.
So when our department heads present their budget, I would also like them to discuss their capital budget requests. So it's almost like we need to see the capital budget before we can even have our people present.
I think that I could probably provide a general oversight of the budget, say at your next meeting, and answer maybe if there's any sort of, generic higher level questions without getting into the specificity of department type stuff. And then we can schedule the department head. I would recommend to you that you do department head presentations outside of a regular board meeting.
Okay. And then with all of the material we have, then I would really like the board, after we hear the capital budget requests, to, I'd like to see some rank ordering of the capital budget material or capital budget requests. And have the finance committee weigh in on possible financing options. If that makes sense to people, instead of
you understand how I provide you the capital budget, right? So it provides you the projects in the year recommended for purchase, what it is, the recommended form of payment or revenue for that purchase. And so it gives you the priorities, and it also gives you the funding source as part of that. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying you can't change that, but I'm just saying in terms of what you're getting, it already there is a sense of priority to it by department heads, and then as a collective group, you're going to see how the priorities sugar off and the recommended sources of funding for that.
Right, but we may not agree with those priorities.
Yes, no, I understand that. I'm just making sure that you know that the capital budget will already have a one or more recommended sources of funding for each project.
So Manu has his hand up, Claudette.
Who does?
Manu,
Oh, man, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Emmanuel Dissone, 428 Hawk Pine. As chair of the Finance Committee, I think I would like to understand in more detail how you would like us to be part of this process. And for example, what kind of deliverables you would expect from us, etc. So as I mentioned a couple meetings back, we appreciate any guidance and requests that the select board can actively make of us. If not, we will charge ahead on our own and do our best.
Madam Chair, I've already communicated with Manu that if he wants me to come to a Finance Committee meeting and present the budget to them, that I'm more than happy to do that. So we've had that, at least that basic communication.
Yep.
Any comments by select board members? Any thoughts about different process? Or is it too early?
I mean, I have a couple of questions. I kind of raised them in August 26, where I said, do we understand or know all our existing capital assets? So a forthcoming document may reveal some of that. Do we need to create or reaffirm new or existing policies to support the town plan and offer capital project directives? And then Claudette hinted at this. Do we agree that we have to offer clear expectations, but rely on Herb and the department heads for these priorities, or should we set them ourselves, or how should we collaborate? And then the tax rate fluctuations, right? And the budgetary impacts. You know, I noticed just at a high level on that document that a lot of what is cut is because of COVID. And so what will happen in 2 years when all that comes back? And then do we have a plan to seek out expertise of our town committees? So, so I don't know, these questions are of course abstract, as I like to do, but I think we should have some answers for these. I think by next week we will understand or know all of our existing capital assets, which is great. But I don't know if we have a sense of the budgetary impacts to the tax rate fluctuations. I don't know how you determine that. So I could use some help with that. Does that make sense?
Or what do you mean by that?
Did you ask me or Roger that?
No, Roger, what did you mean by that?
Oh, yes. So determining how do we, you know, but one of our priorities could be not to have major tax rate fluctuations for the long term of our community. And so how do we maintain how do we maintain a stable tax rate while improving, you know, will the capital budget, for example, get into what tax rate will be required to be raised each year, for example?
It can, yes.
It
I mean, you can layer it, right? You can say what the tax impact of that particular item is going to be, but then the overall effect depends on what's decided on the budget that year. But it's basically like, I mean, it's fairly consistent year to year. It's about $4,000 or so as a penny in tax, right?
So yeah, well, yeah, I mean, but you can, I'll use the word prognosticate what your tax rate may do from that standpoint. So one, It's not going to take into consideration any reappraisal you might have. It necessarily has to involve projecting your grand list, which is difficult at best. But at least you can look at trends in your operating expenditures, trends in your debt service. You can project that forward, and then overlay that with your capital budget for the years that you're looking at with a projected grand list. You factor in the sources of revenue that you're looking to purchase those projects on, and then the net that you need, the net cash that you need from that is your tax rate, is property taxes, and you can calculate a rate based on that, or at least know the absolute number that you need.
Right. So
it's not an exact science, but it helps. Again, a capital budget and program is a planning tool, so it helps you to have discussions that involve 3, 4, 5, 6 years out, and rather than just dealing with 1 year at a time.
right. Okay. So that's my kind of my thinking, like in terms of process. Like if we all agree, let's say, and we won't really know, as Claudette says, until we have some more documents, but if we're looking at some things and say like, look, like our goal is to maintain 4% increase every year, you know, we want to do a one-time increase of, you know, 10%, you know, I don't think, let's say, and then like forego, for one time, we would have to do a lot of promising to our community, a one-time big increase, and then a leveling off. So, and I don't know, I would like to know more about this, if that makes any sense, because, and that's where I think we could use the finance committee might be helpful. John, you're making faces. How was I being, what was that? Was there something I was saying that was unhelpful? Not to hijack the meeting from Claudette.
Don't want to be any part of a 10% raise, and you know, I don't know where that was going, but
well, we have a budget draft that's 15.84% increasing. So that's why I, you know, thought we were talking that way.
Yeah. So yeah, the tax implication of all of these decisions is obviously important. It's usually, you know, it's pretty obvious what the X $1,000 equals this percentage of tax.
So going back, we have a week to look at what Herb has submitted. And hopefully by the end of the week, some supporting documents. And fingers crossed, the capital budget. So by next week, I kind of, if there are departments that don't have a capital request, can we have them present next week, or is that too soon?
No, sure, I'll make them.
I'm asking my board members too. And I'm guessing that might be town clerk. I don't know who. So actually, Herb, that would be up to you. But what does the board think about that?
I can tell you generally who that's going to be.
Okay.
So generally, it's going to be, you know, your committees like the Conservation Committee, the listers. It's going to be the Planning and Zoning Department. Bonnie can be doing some stuff with regard to town clerk and the Board of Civil Authority, as well as the statutory meetings. There are a number of not innocuous, but sort of like the line items on debt service and tax adjustments, things that don't have a capital item related to them, but they're, you know, like the insurances. So there's probably enough of those folks to have a you know a chunk of a meeting's worth. I would just have to, department heads are easy to deal with. If you want those various committees, I mean, Cheryl's here representing the listers. But I could ask Linda Gray and Craig Lane to do those two particular committees.
We've never had committees present before.
I know.
Yes, you have.
We have?
Yeah.
Who?
The listers, as a for instance,
Well, I don't consider the listers a committee, though. That's sorry.
well, I'm just saying, I'm thinking of folks that are not under my purview. So I think Linda Gray has done stuff. The Trails Committee talked about Dial Mountain for quite some time last year.
Yeah, but not as budget, not as a budget presentation. That's, I guess, my.
I mean, generally it's the department heads and all that, but I also, I don't try to rule out anybody else that you might want to get a presentation from.
What does the board think?
Feeling really confused.
John?
Yeah, I agree. It would be nice to have a proposal for a path forward that we could have discussed in this time that we set aside for it. Are we going to have the information available to discuss the capital budget? Is that in what we got right before the meeting today?
No.
You got the operational budget, like the master matrix that you look at. That's basically what you got tonight. By the end of the week, you're going to get all the detail information. This is where I would have preferred tonight to not have general discussion, but just to kind of go through you what you're going to get and then decide how you want to proceed forward. Because I'm looking for leadership from you as much as you're looking for it from me. But in the detail, so what you have tonight, what you have in your email essentially is the by line item, the budget, and it's not say, I am not putting it under the category of like a town manager recommended budget. This is a kind of a first draft budget for discussion because there is a lot in here. There is a lot of, there are a lot of dollars. This is not for the faint of heart. The reason why a lot of the dollars are in there is because me and the department heads are looking for leadership from the select board in terms of where you want to proceed with regard to how far you want to go with capital budgets. How far do you want to go with the potential of tax rate related issues, and the opposite. If you don't want to put in extra cents, a penny on the tax rate is, if a penny to go is about $75,000. So how many pennies are you willing to spend for capital budget related stuff? And that's balanced with the policy direction that we need to say, do you want the existing levels of service to continue in this town at the demand that people require it? And I think that the department heads are trying to reach to you folks and say, we are at a breaking point because the budgets have been held to an austerity level for so many years. We cannot provide the level of service very much longer without either money or a change in policy. So what you have in the budget before you right now is basically to say, based on what they believe you need to get done in this particular community, this is the beginning part of what you need to do financially. So,
Okay, so
sorry.
So I asked if we had what we need to discuss the capital budget. That was my question.
I'll
if
say again that you'll have the capital budget on Wednesday next week.
But if I may go back.
I don't understand. So may I go through and present what I'm going to be giving you? So what you have is a budget. I told you that I would give you a budget on this date, but I also said as part of that clarification quite a few months ago that if I'm not prepared to give it to you, I'm not going to. I'm not going to give it to you until I'm prepared to give it to you. So the only thing I'm prepared to give to you at this point is that initial budget. What you're going to be getting by Friday is you're going to be getting a copy of the audit. You're going to be getting the chart of accounts for all of our accounts. You're going to be getting a worksheet that took me a full week to do, which is, I think, a lot of great information whereby you're not going to be able to see it, but essentially it's a big long chart that it's the total compensation package for each employee, given the steps that they're on, what they're going to be making, all the contract related stuff for the union, the medical, all the benefits. I have what's now called a loaded hourly rate. So if we get into grants and stuff that can get us reimbursed for all what an employee is worth, not just their salary. This is an advancement from what Roberta did. Roberta would give you basically what their step was going to be on July 1st, and that's what the projected dollars were for salaries and the other stuff that's there. What I've done in this chart is to take into consideration their anniversary date, so that the CPI kicks in on July 1st, but the step date kicks in on their anniversary date of employ. So for each employee, I've calculated when that specific step is going to be, so that the value of the numbers that you're getting under the wages and the FICA and the Medicare and all that are going to be as exact as I can do them in an estimated sense right now, based on I've had to estimate the pay schedule right now because I have to wait until probably the middle of November, like every single year, to get the November CPI that we use, because we use a 5-year rolling rate. But right now I'm using a 1.75% CPI. You already have it, but again, your regular matrix with regard to the budget. And then I've got detailed sheets for each of the, just like before, some like this stuff, others don't like it. I personally like it just because it allows me to reference back to it during the whole year. Plus, having a new finance director on board soon, that person's going to want to know what's going on in each particular line item as it was approved. So you'll have all of that information. What will come as part of the packet next week is the capital budget and program, with all the supporting information that goes with it so it's not just going to be, as much as I possibly can, it's not going to be just like the matrix that I gave you last December, but it'll be that same matrix updated, but with the supporting documentation and justifications that go with it. So you'll have, I think, another tier of information by which to understand what's going into the capital budget and program. And then what I want to do as well is to, you've been getting it in the balance sheet every single month, but to have an updated table in terms of the status of the designated funds. And then so those are your 3 key component parts to do that. And then the ideal of the schedule for me is that fairly soon after Wednesday, or if you want part of it Wednesday, that you, at your choosing, you pick a couple days where you want to have presentations by my departments on their particular budgets. I would respectfully request that you involve them even as part of your discussion. That I think in the last couple of years, it's mostly been a presentation, and then the individual department heads have little interaction with you thereafter. I think it would be important to have the department heads interacting with you as part of the discussion process. I'm not saying the decision, but I think that including them in your discussions with regard to what policy direction you may be headed in, they can provide some valuable insight in helping at least softening out the edges or the buffers of, if you're making a policy direction that says, I don't want the tax rate to go up more than 10%. Well, if you do that, here's the ramification to what might happen to my budget. I think they'd like to be part of that discussion if possible. And then I've offered myself to the finance committee where possible to offer what I have and am putting together so that they can become clear on what will be before you by the end of the week and next Wednesday.
Just one quick, if I may.
Go ahead, Roger.
Rhetorically, I just want to say what's clear about this budget though, Herb, and this is what I was curious about. I guess I was trying to tease it out of everyone with apologies, is this budget or this draft, this handout, as you say, with a 15.84% increase has really made the point after talking to the department heads that your tax rate will have to raise in order for these departments to have the level of services that they think our community needs or deserves. I think that is like the very clear, like high level outcome where, obviously I don't think anyone wants to raise during a global pandemic, a tax rate of 15.84% increase rather. for operating. But it's very clear by this document that the departments are advocating for substantial increases, and that we need to get comfortable with that to some regard. And I think we started this by saying, like, can you do the 10% cut reduction? So we went a different way to say, like, actually more is needed for services. And so, you know, we could tease that out a little bit, but I appreciate that everyone wants documents in order to engage in a conversation. But it's very clear to me that when you're looking at, you know, some of these line items are 570% increases, 784% increase, 45 and 30% increases, that this is a document that is saying that we are underfunded in our line items. And if that's the conversation we want to take on, we're gonna need some more dates on our calendar. That's what my impression, if I may offer an impression. And with that, I step back with apologies.
So then what I would like to do is, when we have the initial budget tonight, nobody seemingly except for you, Roger, has had a chance to look at it in any great detail. I haven't had a chance to look at it. By next week, we should have the capital budget and all of the supporting documents. Then I think we go from there and set up 3 meetings in December. Boom, boom, boom. The 2nd, the 16th, and the 30th. By the 2nd, we should have had enough of an opportunity to have the presentation from some of our department heads. And we can decide which ones next week. By the 16th, the same. And again, I want the department heads to be able to explain their capital plan as well as their general budget request. And we can't do that until we have all the documents. Okay, I hear. And then, so we do, on the 2nd, we have one group of department heads. On the 16th, we have another group of department heads. And on the 30th, we, I would,
They're not Wednesdays.
Pardon me?
Why don't you meet on some nights that are not Wednesdays? Wouldn't it be easier? Wouldn't it be more?
Oh, you're thinking like the 2nd, the 3rd, the 16th, 17th,
something like a
16th,
meet on a Tuesday and a Wednesday night, or a Tuesday, Wednesday, and a Thursday, and get the presentations over with, and get in and save yourself the time to have the discussion that you need to have. And I know that there are folks that travel and work, and it's hard, but I think the concern I have is that if you just do Wednesdays, you lose days and time in there, and possibly, or take, like you've done before, you've taken a Saturday for a town plan public hearing.
So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. And I'm happy with 2 consecutive days, whatever, but I am not prepared at all to even discuss policies. Policy may be on the very general, but not to have any kind of discussion about anything budget related except for process. That at this meeting and possibly at the next meeting. I think we need the material in our hands and time to absorb it before we can even come up with anything.
Great. So this happens every time. So this is a process meeting that's totally random and just random discussion here. There's no direction to this discussion that we've wasted all of this time, and we set all this time apart for. And it doesn't matter what you're going to present to us if we can't look at it. We've talked about this every year. You can tell us all the great things that are going to be in this document, and we're not going to remember a single thing you've said because we don't have it in front of us to look at with you. Right, so you lead us through that when we have a document.
Right. What you-
Otherwise, we're just wasting our time talking randomly here about, with no direction about what this process is going to be, so that the process is going to be exactly what it's been for the last 3 years.
Well, I would appreciate the understanding that there is some budget information that I didn't receive until literally yesterday.
Great, so we shouldn't have this discussion yet. We should all go on with our lives for the next hour instead of pretending to have a discussion that we're not ready for.
So Roger,
I just don't want the criticism of that, well, you got the budget late again, Herb, because I can only put it together based on when I get it. And that includes committees, that includes that most of the department heads got their stuff together on schedule. But I literally was getting stuff yesterday, last Friday, and I'm trying to get stuff together for you in a reasonable fashion that makes sense, that is not just a throw it together type of document. And I think what is very difficult is the lack of appreciation of the work that that is going into this kind of effort.
So I'm not saying anything about that. I'm saying that if it's not ready, fine, just say it's not ready yet. And then we wait and have the discussion for when it is ready.
Yep, I think I started my discussion out that way, and I know you all have.
There's no value to the last hour as far as I'm concerned, because there's no direction to it. It's just everybody's random thoughts on a budget that none of us have seen. And we know that there's going to be a proposal for a bunch of new taxes because there's a bunch of stuff in this document that we haven't seen that's going to be big and necessary and important, but that's just not advancing any discussion. So we need a direction. We need some ideas on what sort of things are going to fall when in this process. And then we need to decide to do that, as far as I'm concerned. And just random just talking is not going to be beneficial to any of us.
So I would suggest that the board take it upon itself to set a schedule for when you want to hear the budget and the presentation. And that's what I thought that you guys were in the middle of trying to do.
Yeah.
Because that's not my job.
so I'm backing us up here. When we're projected to get the documents, everything that we need to look at this budget by next meeting. And at our next meeting, we will set up our dates for department presentations. And then set up and go from there.
We could do that now, but sorry, I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I forget
I'm
that I
happy
said
with
that.
doing it now.
Forget that I said that.
Do people want to do it now? Set up our budget meetings and we can fill in the details later, or wait until next week? At least set up the meeting dates tonight. That work? So I'm gonna go with, does December 2nd work?
That's for me.
That's a Wednesday.
Yeah.
Is there a preference on December 1st or December 3rd as our second meeting that week?
I can go either one.
I'll be recuperating from an operation that week. So the later in the week,
Later,
the more likely I will be.
So the 3rd works better for you? John, any thoughts?
Yeah, I can make both of those work.
So Roger,
Yeah, that's great.
the December 2nd and the 3rd.
And will that be enough time to hear all the department heads back to back, or do we need a third one?
I'm thinking that we might need a 3rd one, or
We'll probably need a lot more, but just with those
Yeah.
be dedicated to department head presentations. Is that likely?
on the 2nd and 3rd, and I think
Yeah.
DPW were they alone the last?
Thinks they were.
So So do we wait until the 16th or do we schedule a meeting on the 9th of December?
I think we should schedule it on the 9th as well and just blast through.
Does that work with Roger, John, and Rob?
It would for me, and then we might want to have the 16th anyway.
Yes, the 16th anyway.
I mean, if we get way ahead, we can always cut one
We can
out.
always cancel.
That's right.
Dream on. John,
Well-
does the 9th work for you?
Sure.
Okay. And we'll keep the 16th and then we'll sit on the 30th right now. Do we want to book it and then cancel it if we don't need it?
That's probably smart.
I'm relatively hostile to a meeting during that week personally.
Okay. So we'll sit on it for a minute or for a while.
So
Yeah, Manu.
Just I'm thinking of ways we can be helpful and add some value. I have spent the last couple hours looking at the numbers that Herb sent. And just to put things in context, because I appreciate it's difficult to talk about data without seeing it. But just based on what I'm seeing in a very quick analysis, 75% of the increase is in the Public Works Department. 90% total includes finance and general administration. And if we look at the Public Works Department, most of that change is driven by designated funds in paving primarily, and then
special projects.
Yeah, basically it's special projects. So that's kind of where the big movement is. Yep. Overall high level. Again, I have not gone into this in any more detail on that. But if I may briefly can I show you very quickly, perhaps something that can help us, the Finance Committee, perhaps this is something we could share before a meeting with a division head. Perhaps we can send over some questions, some high level, why is this moving? Why not? So that at least you all can focus on one, you understand, the top 3 things that are moving are these, A, B, C, and then why is that happening? And ultimately, that's really what's going to move things, right? Would that work? I don't know. I'm just trying to be helpful.
I think it would be very helpful.
Can I briefly show you my screen? Would that be okay?
Okay with me. What do y'all think?
Show your screen in terms.
I just want to show you the analysis that I just did, just as an example, so you understand what I'm saying. It takes a second.
Okay.
All right. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
I'm not talking about delivering a massive piece of work unless you all need it. But if you just look at, this is the summary of all the data, you can see right away, Public Works accounts for 75% of that. And then all I've done really is just a pivot table and to look into the Public Works and highlight automatically what the biggest changes are, right? And so this we can easily do, I can easily do without convening the committee as a way to help out. So this is it really. But, obviously we can go into a lot more detail if you want us to, but I just want to give you an example of what's possible coming from the committee.
That's very similar to what Pepper did the past couple of years. And I think it's very helpful.
It is very helpful.
Okay. So what I propose is then I will reach out to my fellow committee members so that we can put something together. And once you set the dates on these meetings, we'll do our best to deliver these questions and analysis before those. And obviously, we would like to be part of those meetings so that we're not cut out of the discussion.
And we would be thrilled to have you.
All right, great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think to address a point that was raised earlier, I would not personally think that it's a good use of time to have a separate budget presentation to the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee can join us at the presentation for the Select Board. That just seems like a ton of their time and town manager time that could be better spent. That's my personal view on that.
Okay, so I see I saw the very brief message from Roger that Mary had her hand up and Cheryl had her hand up, and I don't know if we've addressed. Oh, it's go to Cheryl first. I mean, go to Mary first. But before we go to Mary, are we okay with these 4 dates to start with? Or do we want to try to even set up more dates? We'll hold the 30th in reserve as a only if necessary.
Let's try with those 4, and then the 30th in reserve. But
Yeah, didn't we do it in 4 last time? 2
Yeah.
presentation days and then 2 working days?
yeah, were we considering a capital budget then?
No, we didn't consider.
That might be
And it was part of the budget. I mean, it was.
Well, it was the last day.
sort of an outline.
So okay.
Go ahead, Roger.
Well, I guess my question, in terms of process, and maybe I just love it to my own detriment here, but then what are we also expecting, like, Larry, for example, since yes, Manu's observation is absolutely right. Most of the proposed increases are in public works. What kind of information or how are we expecting that information to be presented? I think historically it's been, please attend, have some ideas in your back pocket. We will ask questions of you. But with proposals like this, I really need to hear an argument and really need to understand why, if it's deferred maintenance, if it's years of not proper budgeting, if it is an austerity mindset, as Herb has outlined. So I think another process point would be like, what would be, the most, do we want to see a presentation? Do we want to have Herb sort of provide the executive summary, so to speak, and then have Larry be available for the specificity of questions? Things like that. Like, so if we're talking about, if special projects is mostly culverts, then I'm going to need to understand more about these assets, for instance. And so if we don't have, so what do we want to be prepared to see, or will we just see it when we know it? This is the kind of questions that I think we need to figure out, but I don't know how to do it, and I don't want to frustrate us.
Well, it could be an executive, or it could be a high level presentation by the department head.
Okay.
So, and we could ask him, or have him be prepared to review what his, it's like we don't need the things that are changed $100 or whatever, but these big ticket items, the justification and the explanation of.
Okay.
John?
Yeah, I agree. I think that they would all be aware of this, but this is an advocacy exercise, right? So especially if it's a big increase, that is an advocacy exercise that is going to be met with questions, and so should be supported and advocated for, and
And what I do not want to hear is, personally, is that these are the expectations of the residents of town, because we've never, how has that been determined?
Well, I think more to the point, we're just as capable of judging that as they are. So that's, that's what we're all trying to determine in this process, is what the town would like to do. So,
So does that answer your question, Roger?
I think so. Yeah, I think, like, obviously presentations need to happen, but then it's not just an opportunity for, to sit under like trial by jury, right? Where we like, well, of course, we'll have a healthy skepticism and want to hear more, but like we also, I think in general, we want to hear a presentation. We want to hear some advocacy, as someone has said. We want to make the case a little bit. And whatever tools someone needs to do that, like whether it's historical data, whether it's, examples about how this will improve the quality of services, whatever the point of view is, it needs to come out, I guess, in these presentations very clearly. I do not mind visuals either.
I hear you. Yeah.
Mary-
Any other select board comment before I go to Cheryl?
Yes, I'm waiting a while. I'm just wondering, 2 or 3 years ago when we were cutting, we were very concerned about the FEMA, the storm damage and how it hollowed out our entire financial landscape. And we did a bunch of cutting to designated funds. And I'm just wondering if that's coming back to bite us, in that the trucks still, depreciate over time, have to be replaced. We took out some chunks of money to kind of ease the budget at that point. Is this the point where, it would probably be a good idea either to put the money in, or else you have to get rid of a truck. If you get rid of a truck, you're going to compromise the routes, or you reduce your budget by actually letting people go. There's perhaps some historic aspect to this that I would like to sort of get a handle on it. I don't really know how to do it. Like, what did we take out then?
That could be part of the department head's advocacy, So.
Well, it would be, yeah. And I like that Manny can go in and he spent a couple hours looking at the figures. He can analyze it, and he says, well, this is where the movement is. And that's what's so hard to do when you're looking at all the scattered line items. It's like you're not getting that big picture. And the level of service, really, what is that? How do we define it? We assume, if people really don't like the level of service, they ask for more. Or if it's too expensive, they vote down the budget. But those are very extreme. I don't think you want the public to get to that point. But you do want it to be a good value for them, and you want it to be appropriate services. But I don't know how to get at that.
Well, I think we need to wait until we have more information.
Yeah.
Rob, did you have anything to add, or do you? No. Okay. Cheryl?
Yeah, very quickly, I was just going to mention back in the beginning when you were looking at who doesn't have designated funds, that the listers and Bonnie both have designated funds. So we really aren't, groups that don't, or departments that don't. So I was just going to comment on that initially. But the other thing I want to say is, I can't imagine that Herb has put together all these numbers and hasn't seen the increases from his department heads and hasn't said to them, you got to come prepared to defend this. I mean, come on. That's just a basic process that goes on with budget. So Herb has got to have something to give you all from those department heads. And I feel like the finance committee shouldn't get ahead of Herb on anything either. I think that needs to be given its opportunity, and the finance committee can support the select board and Herb, but I feel like we need to let Herb finish getting the budget presented to you guys and gals.
All
right. So if there are no other questions, comments, we're going to wait until next week to get all the material. Our subsequent, we will then determine who presents on the 2nd and the 3rd, or the order, whatever.
The order and all that. Yeah.
And what do people think about rank ordering the select board, rank ordering the capital plan after we get the projects in the plan.
I don't really understand what you mean by that. I mean, do you mean rank ordering over 5 years or what?
No, so even the upcoming year, if there are 10 items on that list and they come to a total that is too much for us to spend, or what would you identify as a priority, Mary, on that list? And does John share that thought on the priority?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So it's sort of taking so if you remember, we had last time the colored columns that showed what each of us thought about the basic budget numbers, right?
Right.
We had each submitted our own suggestions for how those should change. So that would be taking that a step into the capital budget. I think that's a great idea personally.
Will we have an idea of condition when we make these decisions?
Well, it would,
That is something that department heads would have an idea about if it's physical objects.
well, one would hope. One would think so, yes.
So our ranking would be more informed after we had heard what they said, or maybe
Yeah.
our questions might be sharper if we thought about it ahead of time.
After we hear, we already know that one of the items on the the last year's rendition of the capital budget was paving Blood Hill Road.
Oh,
Or
that's
section of Blood Hill Road.
right.
So, and also it was paving a section of Tilden Hill Road.
Okay.
So, do I think those are, unless I hear something absolutely compelling, that would not be probably one of my priorities.
Right. But the condition of a truck or something like that, I would have to rely on some expertise on that.
Yeah. So are we kind of set with a plan going forward?
I think it's better than when we started. It's going to be a work in progress, though.
Yes, yeah. So Herb, I don't see, okay, I'm going to make an assumption that Herb, so did you hear our dates?
Yes, yep.
Okay. So we'll go from there with our next meeting on the 18th. And then December 2nd, 3rd, 9th, 16th. And tentatively, the 30th is held in reserve. Okay. Are we ready to wrap this up for tonight?
Yes.
Does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Is there a
Second.
second? Motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. John,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Thank you, everybody.
You.
Thank you for this work.
Thanks, Josh.
Say goodnight to Booker.
Yes.
Yeah, say goodnight to Booker.
That's great about Booker.
I love the name.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
So appropriate.
Yes, yeah.
Bye.